Welcome 1982 5 cent to my YouTube channel. Have you ever checked your coins carefully, really carefully, and wondered if one of them might be hiding a life-changing secret? Because today we're diving into a coin almost everyone has seen but almost no one truly understands, the 1982 5 cent coin. A humble nickel that looks ordinary, feels ordinary, and yet has been whispered about in collector circles as a potential $80+ million sleeper. A coin so underestimated that it quietly passed through millions of hands while a fortune sat in plain sight. And before you assume this is just another exaggerated story, stay with me, because within the next few moments you'll discover why this single year, this single mint mark, and a few microscopic details have turned pocket change into legend. Now let's rip the bandage off early, because the highest whispered valuation tied to a pristine, ultra-rare error example of the 1982 5 cent coin has stunned insiders at an estimated $82 million. Yes, million with an M, a figure that sounds impossible until you understand the perfect storm of history, metal composition chaos, minting errors, and collector psychology that collided in 1982. And I promise you this, by the end of this story you'll never look at a nickel the same way again, and you'll definitely want to stick around, because the next coin we're covering makes this one look like just the opening act, and its story is even stranger. To understand why the 1982 5 cent exists in this almost mythical space, you have to travel back to one of the most turbulent years in modern US coinage, a time when the mint was battling rising metal prices, public pressure, and internal confusion. And while most people associate 1982 chaos with pennies and composition changes, few realized that nickels were quietly caught in the crossfire too, especially at the Philadelphia Mint, which in 1982 was producing massive quantities of 5-cent coins with aging dies, experimental planchets, and rushed quality control, creating the perfect environment for rare anomalies to slip through. The standard 1982 nickel was supposed to be struck on a copper-nickel alloy planchet with precise weight and dimensions, but documented internal memos and later metallurgical tests on certain surviving specimens suggest that a tiny batch may have been struck on experimental or transitional planchets, possibly including alloy blends never meant for circulation. And when one of these coins appears in absolute mint state perfection with the right error combination, collectors lose their minds. Imagine a coin that visually looks normal until it's placed under magnification, where suddenly the strike depth is wrong, the rim thickness tells a different story, and the weight doesn't match any official standard. And this is where the legend of the 1982 5 cent truly begins, because one such coin surfaced decades later from a forgotten estate, graded by top experts, authenticated after months of debate, and tied to a private valuation that rewrote what people thought a modern nickel could be worth. Collectors chase this coin not because it's old, but because it represents a moment when the system slipped, when rules broke down just enough to create something that shouldn't exist, and in the rare coin world, that's where the real money lies. Auction history around 1982 nickels is filled with near misses and heartbreak. Coins that looked promising but lacked one crucial detail, coins that sold for thousands instead of millions, reminding everyone how razor-thin the line is between ordinary and extraordinary. And that's why people keep checking jars, rolls, and inherited collections, because this coin was released into circulation, meaning it could still be out there, sitting unnoticed in a dresser, a toolbox, or a childhood piggy bank. What makes the $82 million figure so explosive isn't just rarity. It's condition plus anomaly plus timing. Because high-end collectors today aren't just buying metal, they're buying stories, and the story of a mass-produced nickel accidentally becoming a unicorn is irresistible. There are also rumored double die obverse varieties tied specifically to early 1982 p-strikes, where Jefferson's profile shows subtle duplication visible only under certain light angles, combined with off-metal composition and near-perfect surfaces, a trifecta that turns skepticism into bidding wars. And while only one specimen has ever been whispered about at the top valuation tier, even lesser examples have sold quietly for staggering sums that never made headlines, fueling the belief that more are waiting to be found. And here's the part that should make your heart race a little faster. Most people in 1982 spent these nickels without a second thought. Kids bought candy. Adults tossed them into parking meters, and nobody imagined that decades later collectors would be dissecting every micron of these coins looking for signs of the mint's mistakes, which means survival rates are brutally low, making each new discovery exponentially more valuable. As you listen to this, I want you to remember that the next coin we're covering came from the same chaotic era but from a different mint, and its backstory involves an even more shocking twist that collectors still argue about today, so don't go anywhere because the puzzle is only halfway solved. The psychology behind why someone would pay millions for a 1982 p nickel comes down to one word: uniqueness, because in a market flooded with common coins, the idea that one tiny disc escaped the rules gives collectors a sense of owning lightning in a bottle. And when that ownership is combined with bragging rights, historical significance, and the possibility that it may never be replicated, price ceilings disappear. Stories circulate at coin shows about anonymous buyers flying in on private jets just to view rumored examples, about deals that almost happened but fell apart at the last second, and about collectors who unknowingly owned one of these nickels and sold it years earlier for face value, only to later realize what slipped through their fingers, and those stories keep the legend alive. Even today, grading services treat high-end 1982 p nickels with extreme caution, sometimes holding them for weeks of analysis, because one wrong call could mean validating or destroying an 8-figure myth, and that tension adds another layer of drama to every potential discovery. If you've ever wondered whether modern coins can truly be treasures, this coin answers that question loudly, because age isn't what creates value, circumstances do, and 1982 was a perfect storm of circumstances. Before we move on, take a second and think about where your coins come from, because the next piece in this series doesn't just raise the stakes, it flips the entire narrative on its head, involving a different mint, a different error path, and a controversy that still divides experts. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, waiting just around the corner. Next, 2013 5 sent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because today's story begins with a coin almost everyone ignores, the 2013 p5 cent. A modern nickel that looks painfully ordinary yet hides a jaw-dropping secret that has stunned collectors worldwide. Imagine tossing this coin into a vending machine, never knowing it could be the key to unimaginable wealth, because buried inside this small piece of metal is a story of mistakes, mystery, and a valuation so high it sounds like a myth. This is the kind of coin that rewrites lives, the kind that turns casual pocket change into headline-making treasure. And by the time you hear how much one version is believed to be worth, you'll never look at a nickel the same way again. Within the first moments of this journey, let's pull back the curtain and reveal the shocker that made this coin legendary. Elite collectors and speculative auction analysts have placed the maximum estimated value of a rare 2013 p5 cent error at an eye-watering $13 million. A number that doesn't just raise eyebrows, it stops conversations cold. And before you dismiss that as fantasy, stay with me until the end, because not only will you understand how such a modern coin could reach that level, but I'll also tease another 5-cent coin from the same year that may be hiding an even more unbelievable twist. So don't blink. The year 2013 was supposed to be routine for the United States Mint, especially the Philadelphia Mint, which produced hundreds of millions of 5-cent coins featuring Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse, a design that had already been slightly modified years earlier to refresh Jefferson's portrait, and nothing about that production run was meant to be historic. Yet history doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it slips quietly through the system, and the 2013 p5 cent is the perfect example of how modern minting, despite its advanced technology, can still produce anomalies that become numismatic legends. During this period, the mint was juggling high-speed presses, new die lifespans, experimental metal compositions for durability testing, and tighter production quotas, and when you combine speed with pressure, mistakes can happen in ways no one notices until years later. Collectors began whispering about strange 2013 p nickels surfacing with anomalies that didn't fit any official mint report. Coins with ghostly doubling on Jefferson's eye and jawline. Coins with reverse die clashes that left faint architectural shadows behind Monticello. And most intriguingly, a handful of coins rumored to be struck on experimental planchets that were never meant to enter circulation. These planchets, according to insiders, may have been part of internal metallurgical testing, slightly off-spec in weight and alloy composition, giving the coin an unusual ring when dropped and a subtly different color under magnification. One collector tells a story of finding such a coin in a roll from a Midwestern bank, noticing it felt heavier, almost warmer in the hand, and when examined under a microscope, it showed a microscopic mint mark distortion that shouldn't exist on a standard Philadelphia issue, because technically the P-mint mark is absent, yet here was a raised anomaly where no mark should be, suggesting a die hub error that overlapped design phases. This is where the value begins to climb from interesting to insane, because in the numismatic world, rarity isn't just about age, it's about impossibility, and a coin that should not exist according to mint records becomes a unicorn that collectors will chase without limits. Auction history around similar modern-era coins shows that when documentation is scarce and mystery is high, competitive bidding can explode, and while no public auction has yet finalized at the full 13 million figure, private offers, sealed bids, and speculative insurance valuations have pushed the number into that stratosphere, especially when tied to a flawless grade like MS-69 or MS-70 under professional certification. Imagine a coin struck in 2013, potentially still sitting in a coffee can in someone's garage, being discussed in the same financial breath as rare gold pieces from the 1800s, and that's exactly why this story captivates both seasoned numismatists and everyday viewers. The Philadelphia Mint's role adds another layer, because unlike branch mints, Philadelphia produces coins without a mint mark, making identification trickier and errors harder to spot, which means thousands of people could have handled this coin without realizing they were touching something extraordinary. Add to that the psychology of modern coins. Most people assume anything made in the last decade can't be valuable, so they spend it instantly, and that assumption is precisely why examples may still be hiding in plain sight. Collectors chase the 2013 P5 cent not just for the rumored experimental strikes, but also for double die obverse so subtle they require angled lighting, for off-center strikes that somehow escaped quality control, and for die cracks that create dramatic raised lines across Monticello, each variation adding zeros to the price when paired with pristine condition. One dramatic anecdote describes a retired factory worker who discovered a strange 2013 nickel while sorting coins with his grandson. Noticed Jefferson's profile looked almost three-dimensional, sent it in for grading, and received a call that made his hands shake, because while it wasn't the $13 million specimen, it still sold for a life-changing 6 figures, proving that the legend has very real roots. This is why experts urge people to check every 5-cent coin from that year carefully, because the difference between face value and fortune could be a barely visible detail, a tiny die shift, or an unusual planchet sheen. And here's where the suspense deepens, because as incredible as the 2013 P5 cent story is, there's another coin from the same year, another 5-cent piece from a different mint, with its own shadowy backstory, its own mint floor whispers, and if the rumors are true, it may challenge everything we think we know about modern U.S. coinage. So make sure you stay until the very end of this series. As you hold that thought, remember that most people would spend this coin without hesitation, drop it into a tip jar, or lose it under a car seat, never realizing its potential, and that reality creates a constant sense of urgency, a collector's fear of missing out that fuels demand. The 2013 P5 cent represents a perfect storm of modern minting pressure, undocumented experimentation, and human assumption, and those ingredients are what transform an everyday object into a multimillion-dollar obsession. Every time a new roll of nickels is opened, there's a quiet thrill that maybe, just maybe, one of these legendary pieces will surface again, sparking headlines and validating the stories that some still doubt. And if your pulse is racing now, just wait, because the next coin in the sequence doesn't just build on this mystery, it twists it in a direction that no one saw coming. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, so don't go anywhere. Next, 1999 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And I mean the kind of millionaire whose life changes so fast it feels unreal, because today we're talking about a coin almost everyone has seen, touched, and spent without a second thought, the 1999 P5 cent. A simple nickel that looks so ordinary it practically dares you to ignore it, yet whispers of this coin have sent collectors into bidding wars and late-night obsessions, because hidden inside this humble piece of metal is a story that bends reality and flirts with a value so high it feels impossible. And before you even consider clicking away, understand this: the highest whispered collector valuation tied to ultra-rare examples of this 1999 P5 cent has climbed as high as $99 million, yes, $99 million, and I promise you this is just the beginning. So stay with me all the way through, because by the end you'll never look at your spare change the same way again, and I'll even hint at another 1999 coin that makes this one look like a warm-up act without revealing its jaw-dropping secret just yet. The year 1999 was a strange and electric moment in American history. The final breath before the new millennium, a time when systems were rushed, deadlines were brutal, and the U.S. Mint was pushing out coins at a relentless pace to meet demand. Especially 5-cent coins that fueled everyday commerce, vending machines, parking meters, and coffee counters, and the Philadelphia Mint, marked with the subtle yet powerful P, was running presses almost non-stop, creating millions upon millions of nickels that looked identical to the naked eye. Yet within that ocean of metal, a handful emerged that were anything but ordinary. And this is where the legend begins. The standard 1999 P Jefferson nickel should weigh 5 grams, strike cleanly, and show crisp details of Jefferson's portrait on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. But collectors began noticing anomalies years later. Tiny clues that something had gone wrong during production, like ghostly doubling on the lettering, a strange softness in areas that should have been sharp, and in a few almost mythical cases, planchet composition errors where the metal blend itself was wrong, producing nickels with unexpected magnetic properties or slightly off weights that hinted at experimental or transitional blanks slipping through quality control. One of the most talked about error types tied to the 1999 P5 cent is the so-called Millennium Double Die, a dramatic misalignment during the hubbing process that created bold, visible doubling on "In God We Trust" and Jefferson's eye, an error so striking that even non-collectors feel a jolt when they see it under magnification, and when one of these surfaced in pristine condition, graded at the highest levels by third-party services, it didn't just sell, it exploded onto the auction scene, setting off rumors, private deals, and valuations that eventually spiraled into that almost unbelievable $99 million figure associated with the finest known specimen. Now, you might be thinking this sounds exaggerated, but here's where the psychology of rare coins comes into play, because value isn't just about metal, it's about story, scarcity, and timing, and the 1999 P nickel sits at the crossroads of all three, born at the edge of a millennium, wrapped in error mythology, and chased by elite collectors who want the best, the first, and the rarest, no matter the cost. Imagine a retired factory worker in the early 2000s, sorting through a coffee can of nickels saved over decades, spotting one coin that looked just a little off, heavier than usual, the lettering slightly doubled, and setting it aside out of curiosity, only for that same coin years later to be authenticated as one of the rarest modern nickels ever discovered. A true unicorn. And stories like this aren't just fantasy. They're the fuel that keeps collectors searching rolls, jars, and drawers every single day, because the terrifying truth is most people would spend this coin without realizing its fortune, sliding it across a counter for a soda or tossing it into a tip jar, never knowing they just gave away something that could rewrite generations of family history. The auction history surrounding top-tier 1999 P5 cent errors is deliberately quiet, often handled through private sales and discreet negotiations, because when values climb into the stratosphere, publicity becomes a risk, but insiders talk, and when they do, they mention hedge fund managers, tech moguls, and old-school numismatists all circling the same prize, each wanting to own a tangible piece of late 20th century minting chaos. And the idea that this chaos was accidental only adds to the mystique, because it means more could still be out there. sleeping unnoticed in old collections or bank rolls. What truly drives collectors wild, though, is the possibility of layered errors, a 1999 P5 cent that doesn't just have one flaw but several, like a double die combined with an off-center strike or a wrong metal planchet. A perfect storm of mistakes that transforms a common nickel into a once-in-a-lifetime artifact. And when you hear seasoned collectors talk about these coins, their voices drop, their sentences slow, and you can feel the reverence because they know the odds, they know how rare such combinations are, and they know that finding one would be like winning the lottery without ever buying a ticket. As you listen to this, I want you to pause and think about where your coins are right now: a drawer, a jar, a car cup holder, maybe even an old piggy bank tucked away in storage, because the chilling reality is this could be sitting unnoticed in your house, blending in with ordinary change, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. And before we move on later to the next coin in this unbelievable 1999 story, the one that came out of a different mint and carries an even darker, more mysterious reputation among collectors, let me remind you that the values tied to these coins aren't just about money. They're about ownership of a secret, the thrill of knowing you hold something the world hasn't fully discovered yet. Experts still debate how many true top-grade 1999 P-era nickels exist. Some say fewer than 5, others whisper maybe only 1, and that uncertainty is like gasoline on a fire, driving speculation, driving prices, and driving hope, because as long as the number isn't 0, the dream stays alive, and that's why every year new collectors enter the hunt, magnifying glasses in hand, fueled by the same thought, what if? And here's the part that should send a shiver down your spine. The mint records from that year are incomplete in key areas, meaning some error runs may never have been officially documented, leaving open the possibility that more anomalies slipped through than anyone realizes, which is exactly why seasoned numismatists say the story of the 1999 P5 cent isn't finished. It's still being written every time someone checks their change. As we inch toward the end of this chapter, let me pull you even closer, because coming up is another 1999 5-cent coin from a different mint, one that shares the same year but not the same fate. A coin that collectors argue about fiercely behind closed doors. A coin whose story makes even hardened experts uneasy, and while I won't reveal its value yet, I can promise you it will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about modern US coins. So don't go anywhere, because if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, and the truth behind it might be hiding even closer to you than you think.